Welcome to the After Work Hangout, the podcast where you'll hear why and how everyday people shifted their careers to meet their personal needs. I'm your host, Crystal Lee. As a career coach of over 10 years, I love to engage in real talk about work and life. In Season 1, we'll chat honestly about work and money. You might be surprised by the underlying factors that have led to different career and financial decisions. So listen, get inspired, and make the moves that are right for you. Yes, so excited to have you, Darlene, on this podcast and just continue a lot of our offline chit chat about work and life, but I should probably do an introduction for you first. So for all those who are joining in for this podcast, Darlene Ma is a senior professional services manager at a software company and a former Toronto District School Board elementary school teacher. I know you as one of the best work buddies I've ever had when we worked together. In fact, we started on the same day, and when I absolutely struggled in that role in the first 2 months, you were the one who told me, Crystal, you can do it, keep going, because you've done it before with a career change, and you reassured me that I could do it too, and things did get better, so thank you for that. You will always have a special place in my heart.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, but for those who don't know, what exactly does a senior professional services manager at a software company do?
Yeah, I know it's a very loaded title, and I think from software company to software company, it can mean very different things. At the company I'm at, a senior professional services manager generally works with our enterprise clients. And what we do is we offer billable services in the form of different projects, working with our customers to implement the software. I don't work with onboarding the customers per se, but I do work with them sometimes in the onboarding stage of the customer journey and beyond that. So we do a lot of project work, and sometimes I'm sort of the voice or consultant of the software that I work for. So that's pretty much what I do.
Thank you for sharing that. And
You're
I've
welcome.
loved seeing you progress within the company since that very first day. We were onboarded. So
Yeah, I can't believe that was what, 3.5 years ago
has
almost?
it been that long? Oh my
It has.
gosh. Okay. Well, also for those who don't know, Darlene and I actually live on opposite sides of the country. And was it a year and a half ago you actually made a trip out and came to visit me on Vancouver Island? And that's one of my favorite memories from that year.
And thank you so much for hosting. I remember mentioning that I was visiting Vancouver and I wasn't sure if we'd be able to meet up. And this would be the first time that we were meeting up in person. And you so generously offered your home and housed me for a few nights. So thank you.
Of course. Yeah, and like so much of how we became friends is because we felt so comfortable just talking to each other about what's going on in our lives outside of work, and we really connected on that. We're both Chinese Canadian. I think we also connected on some of the backgrounds and we'll probably touch on it a little bit more, even in the context today of talk about work and money. But Darlene, before you became a tech worker, you actually were a teacher. So would you be able to share like how you made that transition and why you made that transition?
Yeah, of course. I guess a bit of the backstory. I was someone who was very goal oriented, very focused, knew what I wanted in terms of my career. So ever since I was maybe around 8 or 9 years old, I wanted to be a teacher. I even knew which university I wanted to go to for teachers college. Like I had that vision very clear in my head, and everything came into fruition. Like I was, put in a lot of hard work, but also was very fortunate. I was very lucky in how things ended up, the people I came in contact with who helped me along the way that got me into teaching. So I would say when it came to the actual transition of leaving teaching, I would say the actions of making that change wasn't so difficult. It was more so reconciling something that I had identified with for most of my life. Like I said, since I was like 8 or 9 years old, that's all I knew. I was Darlene the teacher or Darlene the soon-to-be teacher. And I think I really did go through, quote unquote, like an identity crisis when I really felt that teaching wasn't for me. And it was quite a shock to me, and I honestly didn't know where to start. And from there, I guess I started by taking some time off, and I had never really taken time off. I was always someone who worked constantly and even overworked, I would say, again, for myself. And I truly did I just needed a break. I think I was experiencing burnout. And through that break, I was able to dabble in a few things, try out some other jobs, talk to a lot of people. I even hired a career coach. Shout out if you need a career coach. I know Crystal's a great one. Unfortunately, we didn't know each other back then, so I hired someone else. But yeah, so I would say what really kicked it off was working with a career coach.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting to hear. So you actually were one of those people who just quote unquote knew who they wanted to be when they grew up. And you actually did it. And how long did you do it for?
So I was with the Toronto District School Board for about almost 5 years, actually. Yeah. I did a lot of like supply teaching work because that was the natural progression back then. I'm not sure in BC actually if you call them supply teachers, but we were like substitute teachers.
No, I have no idea what that is. Please tell me.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I know the lingo is very different, even though we're both in Canada. But a supply teacher, how we refer to it in Ontario, is what others call like a substitute teacher, or if a teacher is...
Oh, we call them teacher on call or TOC.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. So yeah, I was a teacher on call on the system, every morning, checking in to see what job postings were posted because teachers were sick or just away or say celebrating holidays. And I would fill in and I would jump from school to school. And eventually I landed, the few top schools that I really liked and they liked me. It was mutual. And they would sort of call me as, the person that was like on top of their list. So I would frequent those schools. And then eventually I moved my way to what we call a long-term occasional teacher. So that's where you get a contract for a set amount of time and you are teaching in a classroom, like a full-time classroom teacher, except you're not a permanent teacher.
Oh, interesting.
Not just yet.
Okay, so we hear often in the news that like, oh, teachers are so overworked and you mentioned burnout. Like, can you identify like, is it just over time you started to get burnt out, or is it like one event that really pushed it over? Or like what was that experience like for you? I know burnout is such a hot topic and after the pandemic, I know things have been even harder. So yeah, what was it like for you, the experience of burnout?
Yeah, I would say I've never experienced burnout until that time. So this was almost a decade ago when I was teaching in the classroom. And I would say in the moment at that time, I didn't know what was the cause of my burnout. I think through much like reflection and now more life experience, I can better pinpoint what sort of caused that burnout. So again, I guess in retrospect, I would say the burnout was caused by just being a perfectionist for most of my life. And we've talked about some of these things before outside of, this podcast, but just on our own. But I was very much a highly anxious person, very much a go-getter, a perfectionist. And I had a lot of these unrealistic expectations of myself. Not that anyone put them on me, not that I was even raised in an environment where I had really high expectations. It was just something I was always just doing to myself. And I would say it was just pent up from that over time. And also being in the classroom, not having, I would say, the support that I needed. I had very good people around me, don't get me wrong, but I would say I didn't feel like I was well supported in the way that I needed as a first time or new teacher. Oh, yeah. And in addition to like the unrealistic expectations I had, and also the lack of control I felt like I had, because when you are a teacher, there are a lot of things that unfortunately aren't in your control. Like, yes, it's your classroom, yes, they're your students, but there are a lot of external factors that go into what you do in your job and how you do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. As you described, like, anxious, overachieving. I'm like in my head, check, me too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm the kind of person as well that I just love doing a variety of things. I think, growing up, yes, I was an overachiever, but I also did a lot of things that had personal fulfillment. So I read a lot. I was very well into art, would draw very often, stay up late at night just drawing in my room or writing poetry. I guess, a bit more on the creative side. And I found that with teaching, I wasn't able to juggle the things that I really love to do. So I ended up stopping a lot of the things that I loved. And the other big part was I had to sort of make changes in my social life. I wasn't able to see, like friends and family like I used to. And I'm a very social person. Not so much now in my 30s, but back in my 20s and teenage years, I was very social. So to not have that support system around as much, I felt really did pull me down, and I sort of just got stuck in a not so great place.
Yeah, oh my gosh. And like you said, in hindsight, you're able to really now see a lot of this really clearly. And as a career coach, I often chat with folks who are considering a career change. It's like, what type of lifestyle do you want to have? And like you said, like hanging out with friends and family is important to you, and pursuing your creative hobbies outside of work is important to you. And everyone has these things, and it's different for everyone. So it's great that you, I think, have landed now in a place that really suits the lifestyle you want. And in today's episode, we're chatting about the theme of taking care of your own future in the context of work and money. And you mentioned that was a decade ago now, so it's been a journey to get to current day. One of the reasons, besides the fact that we often have these conversations outside anyway, and why I invited you to this podcast, is because you struck me always as someone who's really financially savvy. I remember just like having conversations with you, and you talking about your money goals and like things you were doing to meet your money goals. And I'm like, oh wow, this person knows what she's doing. So
I'm so flattered, but that's not the case.
Were you always this way? And how did you get this way?
No, I was not always this way. So I guess I officially left teaching back in 2018. So in early 2018, I decided to completely make the shift and get a full-time permanent job in tech. Even with that, I was very unfamiliar with how the job market worked outside of teaching. So, now I know that negotiation is possible, and, there is a bit of back and forth. When I first landed my full permanent tech job, I didn't know that was a thing. I didn't negotiate. I just accepted it. And I did take a pay decrease, actually. So, with teaching, I was making, I would say, a decent salary for that time. And then with my first tech job, because I just wanted to make a change and dive into something new, and I really believed in this company's mission and really liked the people who had interviewed me and my future team, I decided to take a pay decrease, and again, was very financially unaware of, again, how to go about it, how to manage my finances, how to plan, how to make financial goals. It wasn't until, I would say, COVID in 2020 where I had a lot of free time. I went through a major life event. I went through a breakup and was in a very long-term relationship, and that had ended. So I was going through a bit of a shift in my life, I would say. And in that transitionary time, because I was allowed a lot of free time, which typically wasn't the case before, I decided to sort of take my finances and take control of it. I was very risk adverse. I grew up with a family where, sometimes my family members would hide cash, like under the mattress. And I know a lot of people relate to that.
My mom's the same. Yeah. She would be so surprised and happy when she finds like a wad of cash in the old jacket she hasn't worn.
Exactly. So that's my family. Like I remember, when I hear about like family members, passing away, and, our other family members would do the cleanup, and they'd be like, oh, there were like just piles of cash around. and that was so common in my family with my relatives, especially the older generation. So the only thing I knew how to do, again, prior to my financial literacy learning, was hoarding cash, or like you know what I mean, saving. But other than that, I didn't do anything with that cash or money.
Yeah. And this is not something we learn in school.
No.
Maybe they teach it nowadays, but still, like it's just not something that most people grow up learning.
You're right. And I think that's a recent change in at least the Ontario curriculum here, where they are incorporating financial literacy into the math curriculum. But back in my day, we never talked about budgeting, how to make our money work for us, the different types of accounts, mortgages, taxes, any of that. Like, it was very much I learned from my family. I learned from my immediate surrounding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so you mentioned, okay, COVID, you had gone through a major life event, you have more time on your hands, you're not out socializing.
Yeah.
So, like, how did you go about learning? Like, where did you go? What resources? What did you do?
Yeah. So I would say I picked up some finance books. I think it was accidentally too. I was going to, I think it was just probably like a bookstore selling used books, and I just saw a really cheap book on finances for millennials, I believe.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, let me learn about finances. Why not? So I think it started with reading first. I read a few, books, and then that piqued my curiosity, and naturally I started doing what everyone does and goes on the internet, starts Googling or YouTubing videos. So I started following some Canadian, I guess, financial YouTubers or influencers. So I started watching videos in addition to the reading. And then lastly, I was never the kind of person that would voluntarily reach out for help, but I wanted to really work on that, especially again going through the breakup. I'm like, I really do need to lean on my support system in this case, because I don't think I can do it alone. And that same approach was the case for my financial learning. I reached out to a few of my good friends who I knew, who were maybe more savvy in the terms of financial literacy. And I just said, like, hey, like, I'm coming from very little knowledge. I haven't really made any actions yet. I just want to hear what you do or what you know, and take as much of that knowledge as I can and see how, I can incorporate it, and if it's a good fit for me.
Yeah. Like I always feel like when you learn, you just need to chat with someone who knows a little bit more than you. You don't, like, this whole idea of exchanging knowledge and wisdom among your personal network. Like, none of you need to be experts per se,
Yeah.
but if the more we talk about it, the more we learn together.
That's such a good point. And for me, as I guess, teacher, and I still identify as a teacher in some ways, I do best when I also teach others, right? So I'm learning, but I'm also teaching others. And that's when I started having these candid conversations with people, with my friends, to learn from them, but also passing on that knowledge to, like, my family. Yeah. I remember, like, telling my mom and sort of, like, lecturing her. I was like, you have to invest. You have to, like, learn about finances, Mom. Like, especially you're retiring soon. And that's how I would then in turn learn more when I would teach the people around me as well.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Sometimes I think, and mentioning earlier that we're Chinese Canadian, to talk to the older generation about money can be so awkward.
100%. I remember when I first had those, like, initial conversations with my family, and especially with my mom, she would always say, hey, Darlene, investing's like gambling. And I was like, Mom, it's really not. And that's what I grew up with. I thought it was gambling. I thought it was bad to invest. I thought the stock market was evil. But those are the things that the people around me told me. And I really had to challenge those, what I was brought up with, that knowledge. And luckily we're in a world where knowledge is so abundant that I was able to, challenge those things that I grew up with.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned financial influencers. So funny for you, you said it was kind of around COVID, you did your kind of big learning sprint. For me, it was maybe just, a few years before COVID. I actually hired a money coach because I was so anxious about how I didn't know a thing about where I was at, and they crunched the numbers for me because I have no patience to do that. And I was just too close and too emotional about it. So they said to me, it's okay that you don't know anything right now. Just, like, read one little article or follow, like, one person, like, read their newsletters. And over time, you'll just pick up things. And it really was true. Like, over time, I just started to learn the language, the vocabulary, right? What are even people saying when they're talking about in Canada, like TFSAs and so forth. And then during COVID, I was working at a job helping newcomer women establish their careers in tech in Canada. And my job was also to bring in guest speakers. And we had guest speakers from a bank, and it was part of their, corporate social responsibility to volunteer sometimes. And they were amazing. And they were also women who were just saying, like, again, you don't need to know everything. Just start learning a little bit here and there, and suggested a few, like, Instagram financial influencers. So I followed them. Years later, I'm still following them. I've learned so much just in bite-sized pieces.
Yeah.
So it really does work over time.
And I feel like that approach is so applicable to like a lot of things in life, right? It's just like, just take it in bite-sized chunks. It's daunting to learn about finances, especially it's so, like I said, like so personal to us, right? Like we all have different like relationships with money and relationship with finances, and we all have different upbringings and that, you know, sort of molded that perception. So like you said, just do it bit by bit.
Yeah. And another thing is, if you go to a bank, they're going to be biased because they're trying to sell you stuff.
Yeah.
So you should really arm yourself with some basic knowledge to sometimes push back and make your own choices. You know, same thing, not just within your family of like, oh, investing is like gambling and all of that. But like even sometimes with professionals, it's good to have your own agency to decide what is best for you because only you know your situation best.
I think that's a very good point because that's where I started to. After I had read a few books, after I watched a few YouTube videos, I'm like, I just want to get started. And I was very eager. So that's when I worked with a financial advisor that was associated with my bank, and I'm no longer banking with them. But, you know, it was through that bit of trial and I would say maybe a little bit of error that I learned, like, I was like, wow, the fees are so high. These MER fees are, you know, ridiculous when I think about it. But at that time I didn't know. But luckily I made some of those changes. It got me into that mindset, into that shift. And then from there, I just continued learning. So I knew, okay, let me pivot away from this bank, from this like financial advisor and start, you know, doing what makes more sense for me.
Yeah. So if you are to name maybe like top, you know, 1 to 3 things that you've implemented that really made a difference for you, what would you say those top things were?
Yeah. I would say the first, and just even getting started, would be find a few books or YouTube videos or influencers, like you said, and just get started there. The second piece that really helped me get a bit of a pulse point on my finances was tracking. I was never a person that would really budget or track. Like I said, I was good at saving, so I knew like how to just save money. But again, I wasn't aware of what was going out or, you know, like, yeah, like my spending habits. I wasn't really prioritizing what was most important to me when it came to my spending and saving as well and being intentional about it. So I would say tracking and then later that turned into budgeting really, really helped me. I still have a budget sheet to this day. And I'm very, I would say like more old school. I don't do it with pen and paper, but I have a spreadsheet on Google Sheets and I manually enter in numbers.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So not like apps or anything. You've just got like a good old spreadsheet.
Yep. And I've tried the apps. Like, it's not to say, you know, I think anything is wrong with them. It just, for me, I liked seeing each transaction go in and out to really just be aware, because it's so easy to tap cards nowadays, right? And, you know, do it mindlessly, that I wanted a way to be more mindful about my spending. And then the third tip is, in addition to the knowledge, in addition to, you know, tracking and budgeting, would be just to have conversations. I've had so many good conversations with my friends and family where we've learned from each other, where, we've just shared knowledge. And like I said, we don't have to listen to anyone's advice, but it's okay to like keep an open mind, and eventually you will learn something from someone. And sometimes you need to be challenged as well, because there are people that will just know more than you, or maybe they've tried something, right, that you've never heard of. So I would say just being open to having those conversations. And I know it's very taboo to talk about money, even to talk about salaries, but now I'm lucky, you know, at your former workplace, but my current workplace, that I do have a few, you know, colleagues where we've had conversations about like what we're making, our salaries, you know, what we want to jump into next, like in terms of pay. So it's refreshing to have those conversations, which were sort of so off the table before.
Yeah. And us talking about it, we're shifting the culture for future generations, right? But speaking of salary, there's so many great websites now also where you can do salary research. And also, if you don't have some trusted colleagues to talk to, there are Facebook groups where a lot of times people talk about these things. Maybe they're industry focused Facebook groups or LinkedIn groups or whatnot, where people are willing to share. So whether you are an employee about your salary, but even if you are a, you know, contractor, how much should you quote for a project, right? Like, don't undersell yourself. So the more you know, the better you're positioned.
Yes, I think that was a big learning and undertaking was underselling myself. I was not aware of my skills being transferable when I moved from moved from teaching into tech. So I constantly undersold myself. I was just like, oh, I'm a blank slate. I'm starting from nothing. I'm very entry level, but I had actually acquired quite a few skills that really helped me from teaching into tech. So again, I really had to go through that mindset shift internally.
Yeah. I'm so happy you touched on this because this is one of the top things I bring up with my clients, because I help a lot of folks with how to tell their career story and what to say in their cover letters and resumes. And when they look at job descriptions, they're like, oh, they're asking for 5 years and I'm just changing careers, so I don't have any experience. Like, no, your previous experience is still experience. Add it up.
Yep.
This is like cumulatively, how many years experience do you have? Like, you working in a different industry for like 5-10 years before compared to like a fresh grad, like all those years it's experience that's so valuable to wherever you land next. So add up those numbers.
Yes, I second that because I didn't do that before. And like I said, I took pay cuts and everything because I thought I had to.
Mm-hmm.
But now I realize in retrospect that I really didn't. I offered a lot.
Yeah. Okay, so another thing with money, budgeting, tracking, generally speaking, to improve your financial circumstance, you can reduce your spending or you can increase your income. So for you, did you go the increased income route, and how did you go about it? Did you have side hustles? Tell me more about that.
Yeah, for sure. I did it all. So I'm the kind of person, like, once I get excited or curious about something, I just dive right in. And sometimes I dive in without much planning or thinking. I've since gotten better now that I am older and there's just more responsibility in my life. But when it came to my finances, I really took saving seriously. Then I took investing seriously. So I had, again, we talked about, remember those financial goals that I used to talk to you about?
Mm-hmm.
That's when I started a few years ago, just tracking my financial goals. I would say this is the salary or the base salary that I want each year. This is how much net side income money that I want each year. These are the sort of big items that I'm saving for. And like I said, I did it all. I wanted to save. But yes, I did a multi-pronged approach, I would say, and I really focused on the saving, investing. And then in addition to that, I really was thoughtful about what I wanted to do on the side. I'm not someone who's like I said, I like a variety. So even in my teaching days, I had multiple jobs. I was like a part-time bartender. I was a part-time hostess at a restaurant. So I do like a variety. I do like keeping busy. But I would say now I do want a bit more balance in my life. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I've done some contract work in the last year. I've done some sort of starting my own business, I guess. It's so weird to say it because I don't consider it a business yet, but I make candles, as you know. So
yes, they smell so good.
Yeah, thank you.
Can we do a shout out? Where do people find you and learn about your candles?
So they can find me on Instagram at Sweet and Soy. And that's the Instagram handle. I don't have much content up there right now, but I'm hoping to make some changes in the new year. So yeah, so be on the lookout for
and
that.
They're really unique aromas, I just want to say. They're kind of culturally inspired. Can you name a few?
Yeah. So maybe the one that a lot of my friends keep requesting for is the Hong Kong bakery candle. That's one of my proudest candles. I'm still trying to perfect it, so I haven't made it in a while, but I'm going to be experimenting and making some tweaks this year to that candle scent. Yeah, I would say that's a good one. And my sugar cookie latte, very sweet scent, but I love sweet scents. So that's my all-time favorite for the holiday season.
Oh, so good. Okay, so we've talked about you're a hostess, you've bartended, you've picked up contract work, you're selling candles. What else have you done?
Well, my friend, she went on a 4-month leave from work. She did some traveling globally. She decided to Airbnb her home. So I told her, I'm like, if you need someone to help to host, I will do that. So
you would clean and stuff after?
Yeah, so some of the cleaning I did myself. Some of it I would hire someone to clean, again, depending on time and scheduling, if it permitted, because I'm still working my 9-to-5 job. And sometimes things just didn't overlap well. So I would, hire a cleaner. I would do the administrative work in terms of like making sure the guests got there okay, answering their questions on the Airbnb app.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So that was a new venture I did this past year in 2024, along with the candle stuff. And then last year I did event planning. So that was sort of my contract work where I had to reply to a request for proposal, like an RFP, which I know you're familiar with. And yeah, I got some contract work with a nonprofit working and managing their events.
Okay, I must ask, how do you find these things? The one that you just kind of saw opportunity and pose it to a friend, but like these contract opportunities, like you said, you do work 9 to 5. Like, how are you finding these things?
Yeah, so I would say it's honestly word of mouth. I'm very fortunate and grateful for the friends I have in my life who look out for me, but it's also because I've started voicing the things that I'm looking for and wanting in life. Again, that's something I, growing up, would always keep to myself. I had my goals and my aspirations deep down inside of me. I would write it down, but I wouldn't really talk about it, and I wouldn't talk about the progress or just what I wanted in life. And it was only, like I said, in the recent years where I'm just like, let me start just communicating my goals to those closest around me. And because of that, they would keep their eye out for me. And if there was any opportunity, they'd be like, Darlene, I think you'd be great for this. And I'm like, I would? And I would question myself, but they would have more, belief in me than I would in myself. And it was just because of sharing sort of the things I wanted to do or try that people would just keep a lookout for me. And then also, I do vision boarding. And I think you do too, right?
I do. I'm hosting one next week.
Yeah, exactly. But because of that, I'm just more observant, I guess, and able to see opportunities where maybe I wouldn't have otherwise if I wasn't really paying attention to those things. So they sort of just come up on my radar, and I'm just more in tune with seeing those opportunities.
I love this. Okay, because I feel like in more of the so-called woo-woo world of manifestation, like it's not just like asking for the universe and the universal answer, but it's like there's a science behind it, like social networks. There's just like, what's on the top of someone's mind. Like the more you talk about things and the more people know, the more support you naturally have for attaining those things.
Exactly. And I think that's it. There is that type of like woo-woo perception where you're just like, oh yeah, if you just believe it enough, it'll just fall on your lap. But I think we know, again, through our life experience that we're like, yeah, that's somewhat true, but we also put in the work behind the scenes that, sometimes we don't often talk about or people don't often see. And that's something I'm trying to better communicate, is that a lot of the things I am like hoping for and working towards, I am putting in the work. I usually break down my goals into like micro goals and work on that. And I do track my habits. So again, I wasn't always this way.
Is that another spreadsheet?
Yeah. No, actually, I do like journaling with pen and paper. So it's not another spreadsheet. It's more the old school way of putting a pen to paper. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, so in the practice of putting it out there, what would you say are your major money goals, or even if generally goals for you that you're excited about and focused on?
Yeah, so I'd say for this year, for 2025, I am just really working on continuing my existing goals. So I had some like side hustle money goals or income goals from the previous few years, and I honestly just sort of keep that same goal, and I just like up the amount I want to achieve this by the end of this year. And I think other big things for me now are focusing on hopefully learning more and creating more passive income. When we talked about all of my side hustles in the past and part-time jobs, I think in that phase of life, it worked well for me. I had the energy for it. I would say that energy is no longer the same, and that's okay. But I am, entering a different phase of my life now in my mid-30s, and really just wanting to have a bit more time back for myself and not so much chasing or trying to work for that active income. So that's sort of one of the bigger goals I have for this year.
Yeah, okay. So maybe even just to describe it for folks who may not know what passive income means, can you share like examples of passive income sources or things you read about or learned about or exploring? Yeah,
I'm still in the very early stages of learning and exploring, but so active income for me means like you're trading your time for money, and for passive income it's the opposite, where you're not so much trading your time and energy for money, but it's sort of happening without you sort of inputting that amount of time that is traditionally needed. So things like, investing, when you're putting your money into something and say receiving dividends, if you perhaps purchase like royalties for a product or like, let's say a song, that way you're again not investing that time, right? But you're getting the residuals along the way, right? Without actually putting in the time to get that income. So, and same with like investment properties. But again, there is some time and effort upfront involved, but over time you would hope that it becomes more passive along the way.
Yeah.
So things like that.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. That was very educational and presented very well.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and I think you have so much life experience now that if you were to choose passive income sources, like you have a lot to offer.
I thank you for saying that. I think for me, it's hard to believe that right now. I still feel like I'm such a newbie in so many parts of life, especially, like I said, this financial journey is still quite new to me, being only like 3 or 4 years of my life, and I'm in my mid-30s, so it is a very like, shorter chapter. Mm-hmm. Thank you for saying that.
So this podcast really aims to inspire folks who are, in transition phases, exploring maybe a potential career move. And on the topic of money, what advice would you have for folks who are considering a career move? How can they set themselves up for success?
Yeah, I would say the first part is really like the self-reflection. I forced myself to take time off and really be alone with my thoughts, which I hadn't done because I was such a busy individual. All of that sort of just got buried with just being busy that I never really had time or the opportunity to check in with myself and say like, hey, am I enjoying teaching? Or is this what I want in life? I was just, again, so I had such tunnel vision into my goal that it didn't matter how I felt. I just needed to achieve that goal. So again, I know I was very fortunate at that time. I was living at home. Finances weren't the top of my worry at that time. I had a lot of money saved. I was living at home rent-free. Very fortunate for my mom for that. But I was able to take time and energy to just really reflect on what I wanted in life, how I wanted my life to look like day to day. And also, thinking about, like, I guess that's it, like what I truly deemed as important, because I think what I thought was important back in my, like childhood days or teenage days when I was deciding that I wanted to be a teacher were vastly different than someone who was like in their mid to late 20s. And even that has changed now that I'm in my mid 30s. So really just having those check-in points, I would say, is a good starting point to self-reflect, whether that's talking it out with someone, whether it's talking to yourself, writing to yourself, journaling, whatever it is. There's so many different modes out there to reflect. So I would say that was a big part in really, truly thinking about what were my priorities and how I wanted my life to look. And then the second piece was really reaching out to those around me. I did a lot of informational interviews, and for those of you who don't know, but that's really reaching out to sometimes strangers, sometimes people in your network or their network, and asking for them to meet over coffee or have a virtual chat and ask them about their career journey. And that's exactly what I did. Luckily, my career coach helped me with that. But I reached out to a bunch of strangers, and I was pleasantly surprised at how kind people were in talking about their journey and their career pivots and what they were currently doing. And it allowed me to reflect and see if that's what I wanted in my life.
Yes, so happy you brought this up.
Yeah.
Because as a career coach myself, I also am such a huge fan of informational interviews, aka coffee chats, super low risk, and super high return. I think a lot of times people are nervous about the idea of reaching out to people who you don't know. Like, why would they help me? They don't know me. But like you just said, Darlene, people love to help, actually.
I was so surprised, again, like just how kind people were. I got office tours. I got like
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, and I got people offering me. They're like, "Oh, if you want to apply at my company, I can refer you." And again, back then when I was a teacher, I didn't know what referring meant. I didn't know there was a cash incentive for some at some companies. So I was like, "Wow!" Like it was like a win-win. It was mutual beneficial for both
Yeah.
parties. And I think with informational interviews too, what I really or how I prepared to go into these conversations was like, Darlene, you're just there to learn. You're not there to get anything. You're not there to make a friend. You're not there to get a job. You're there just to learn. And no matter how that interaction goes, you will learn something. And that's how I approached it.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I'm often approached by random people, and I can sense people's energy behind why and how they reach out. Like, are you actually wanting to ask me for a job, or are you really there to learn? It really does come off differently. So I encourage everyone to just, know your intentions and be mindful how that reflects in your communications with someone.
Yeah.
And how it would make the other person feel.
Exactly. And for me, like, and we can talk about this a little later because it's off topic, but networking for me is very hard because I don't ever want to feel fake in the connections that I make. I truly want to connect with people I want to connect with. So for me, like informational interviewing, like really helped me genuinely connect with the people that I wanted to connect with. And most of the time, like people saw that. And again, they would offer me additional help afterwards, or like I said, like referrals or tours of their office, or to connect me with people in their network. So I think, yeah, when they sense that genuineness and your intentions, they're more willing to help beyond just the informational interview.
Yeah. Okay, so we talked about when you're ready to consider maybe a career move, do some self-reflection, reaching out to folks to learn more. I think that kind of opens up possibilities for yourself, right? You only know what you know, and then you have to kind of expand that perspective to see new opportunities. You mentioned you were, quite lucky to have had savings and also a place to live. So if folks are considering a change, being able to reduce expenditures to provide a bit of that buffer. Anything else kind of practical that you feel like would be good to bring up as things to note?
Yeah, I would say maybe touching on that point I made previously, but just like being a bit more mindful about spending and saving and having those goals. I know, like, I've watched a lot of like videos on people who've like had side hustles and they weren't sure when to then transition their side hustle to a full-time gig. So they would say like, okay, once I've saved X amount, or once I've earned X amount in my business, that's when I know I can make that transition comfortably. And that number can mean whatever it means to an individual, right? Because that number is going to be different for each of us. But just having, again, just a plan in mind and having those goals and even micro goals to achieve that greater goal, I think is really helpful for those making a transition. Because like I said, yeah, we're not all fortunate to have, like free rent, living with a parent, or have that time that I had when I took that leave of absence from work for my teaching job. So yeah, there are so many barriers out there, but there's ways to navigate those barriers for sure.
Yeah. Okay. 2 things. First of all, I have a dedicated episode this season on someone who had to navigate that change in decision of when to leave their job.
Oh,
so watch
okay.
out for that.
I need to listen to that.
Yes. Okay. Second part, going back to your spreadsheet tracker for your expenses, unless you know that well enough, it's hard to know what's the minimum income you need before you can make a jump or whatever it is. So again, like knowing your status helps you make a move not out of fear, but out of, what would the word be here? like empowered decision making.
Yeah.
That you're choosing something to pursue your goals and what you desire in work and life, but not just like fear-based decision making.
Yeah. I think it's a very good point, because I am one, I think maybe more in my past, but like I was one that was more of that fearful decision maker. And I think that's why I would just make decisions so quickly, because I didn't want to think about it too much, or I would just get in my head. So I would just make decisions and just deal with whatever consequences there were, or just figure it out along the way. But now I think striked a good balance for myself, where decision making isn't so brash and and so hurried.
Yeah. Okay, so this podcast is all about, like, life isn't just about work.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned you often have other pursuits and interests. So how do you recharge outside of work, given that you do spend a lot of time working, it sounds like?
Now, not so much. Like I said, I've reduced the amount of like time I spend on side hustles, and I've gotten back into more so just doing hobbies for the sake of doing them versus having that money goal attached to it or business goal attached to it. So I would say, how do I balance? I'm like, I don't know, I go on a lot of walks. Like,
Yeah.
I talk to a lot of friends. I watch a lot of food content. Like, when I am on Instagram, like, I'm just watching food videos, and that helps me, sort of relax and center myself. Maybe it makes, me salivate and increase my appetite, but, that's something else. Yeah, I don't know. And just, honestly, just being more present. I would say when I was younger, I just wasn't present. My mind was always in the future, thinking about the future, that I wasn't really there and present with my friends and family, present with myself, and taking in those, like, those small moments that are so significant and important to us. But yeah, just being a bit more mindful nowadays and enjoying what I have now.
Yeah. I'm a few years older than you, but something that I love is solitude. Just like sometimes being alone and feeling bored. It's such a nice feeling to have.
Honestly, it's become like it. I feel privileged when I have solitude, when I have quote unquote nothing time, or you know what I mean? Because I think, as we get older, it does become more scarce. So yeah, I'm really trying to hang on to those moments, because right now I am child free. I am, not in a romantic relationship. And I'm like, I don't know when I'm going to have this opportunity again where I have this leisure time, or, have a space to myself completely. So I'm really just trying to cherish it.
And honestly, to let ourselves just not do anything when we do come from immigrant backgrounds, where for many immigrants, like, they must work to make ends meet, and sometimes those generational stories are passed down, and for us to say, no, I don't have to fill every single moment of my day. I give myself permission to just rest. That's so powerful and so nourishing.
You hit it on the is it hammer on the nail? No, nail on the.
I don't know.
I don't know what that saying is.
Head.
Yeah, nail on the head. That's what you did just now. But you're right, because, and I don't know if this is like if it's a cultural thing, or it's something attributed to us being women or women of color, but the guilt that's attached to just truly resting and not making every moment of our lives productive or in the service of others or helping others, that's something I really had to grapple in the last few years. And I know COVID was a very hard time for many people, but for me, it gave me what I needed to sort of balance and relearn that rest and free time, where I'm not earning money or being productive, was okay.
I feel like I have to mention this, even though this whole season is about work and money, but like, everyone has value. Life is not just about money and making money. Like, we actually live in this capitalistic society where we're just kind of fed this idea. And so, yes, we're talking about tips to earn income and reach financial security, but I am very well aware we're just living in a system that's promoting a lot of stories of what we need.
Yeah, and I think that was part of my identity crisis that I had in my mid-20s when I was deciding if I wanted to leave teaching. Was I tied so much of my self-worth and my self-value to that job in that profession, because I knew that, teaching was a noble profession. It was helping others in the service of others and for the greater good. But honestly, like, I at what expense, right? And also, I'm so much more than that. I'm so much more than just someone who teaches and someone who works with kids. I offer a lot, and that offering isn't tied to a number or isn't tied to a dollar value, and I'm okay with that.
And you still care about those things. That doesn't change, right? Like, and you sent me a bio so I can read it, but why don't you share? Like, how are you still engaged with those topics that you care about?
Yeah, so when it comes to the education world, I sat on a board for a few years. I've since discontinued that, but I sat on a board where that nonprofit, that charity, helped children and youth with mental illness and mental understanding and just well-being, and running programs for students, but also running programs for the parents and guardians. And I've also did some event planning, like I said, for an education nonprofit organization based in Toronto. So they run a lot of youth programming for marginalized youth and in communities close to where I'm living actually right now, and helping and servicing for youth that don't have the opportunities for STEM education in the same way that other people do. So I'm still involved in that sense. I think I do miss working with children and kids directly. So right now I am in the brainstorming phase of how I want to continue to sort of feel that passion, maybe being more on the ground and working with kids and youth directly. I don't know how that's going to look, but I'm sort of on the path of figuring that out right now.
Yeah. And we don't have to know all the time.
No,
we can just be on the path. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're an auntie. So you're a very good auntie.
Yeah. And honestly, I've been teaching him things, and it's so rewarding to see, my 1-year-old nephew learn like a sign language symbol that I taught him. And yeah, and teaching him words and stuff, and teaching him to make silly faces even. I don't know if his parents approve of that, but like, I am getting that in other ways. And there's so many other ways to teach. And I didn't realize that, 10 years prior.
Yeah. Okay, I can talk to you forever. But okay, any final words on the idea of taking care of your future?
I think my final words are just not to never stop checking in with yourself, never stop learning. I think as humans, we're always going to grow and pivot and change. And even if we are the kind of people who don't actively try to change, the world around us is changing. So in whatever way it happens, there's going to be change, whether it's from your end or from external factors. There's like change is inevitable. So with that, I say like try to continue evolving and learning, and really just staying true to yourself and listening to yourself, and just try to be a good human being in the process of that.
Yeah. Thanks for these words. The world is in an interesting place, and we just started a new year. Mm-hmm. I don't know when this podcast is going to be released, but we're recording at the beginning of the year. And I think there's going to be a lot of stuff happening this year.
I think so. Yeah. And that's the thing. There's going to be, I don't even know the right word for it, but like there's going to be things that are good and bad that's happening. But I think what we can do is continue to learn from that, continue to show up with empathy, and try to do as much as we can. We do have, like impact, whether it's through like our day-to-day actions. And again, this doesn't have to be associated with our jobs where we can make an impact, but in just the little things, I think that's really important.
Little things, everyone. Little things, micro goals.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thanks again for joining me. So happy to have this chance to chat with you, and maybe we'll do it again. Who knows?
I really hope so. I think I might put that on my vision board because I had such a good time.
Okay, let's both do it.
Okay. Sounds like a plan.
Thanks for listening to the After Work Hangout. If you enjoy honest conversations about career decisions and life choices, remember to subscribe to the After Work Hangout so you'll know when our next episode drops. And don't forget to leave a 5-star rating while you're at it. You can find a summary of this episode along with more information about our guests and resources that were mentioned at relocal.ca. That's RELOCAL.ca. If you take a look around the website, you'll also find blog posts, downloads, and community offerings to support your career development. I'm your host, Crystal Lee, and I'm always interested in hearing what topics you'd like to learn about. You can connect with me on Instagram at relocal.ca, or you can email me at crystal@relocal.ca. Finally, I want to say a big thank you to all the guests and supporters who make this podcast possible. This includes my podcast manager, Lindsay Curtis, and graphic designer, Alex Dewar, who created the podcast art. Thanks again for listening and sticking around. I hope you're more inspired and ready to make the moves that are right for you. See you at the next Hangout.